r/ask Reddit. Serious, what is an open secret in your industry, profession or similar group, which is almost completely unknown to the general public? Surgeon here. All surgeons make mistakes while operating. Any surgeon who doesn't is either not operating enough or lying. It always blows my mind when people act like a surgeon/doctor making a mistake somehow means that doctor deserves to lose all his money, lose his career, and go to jail. Obviously standards are higher since they could, you know, kill someone. But to act like there's the slightest possibility that they never make mistakes is just nuts. I find it especially crazy that people think you can sue a doctor for being wrong about a diagnosis. The doctor is making their best guess based on the evidence available. They aren't magic. Missing your cancer isn't something you can sue about unless the doctor didn't meet the standard of care or did something negligent. Retail worker. If something isn't on the shelf, unless it's on ad or there's a special coupon for it, there's a 90% chance that we don't have any in the back. And if you ask us to look in the back, there's an 80% chance that we'll go back there, stand around, bullshit with other coworkers for a few minutes, only to come back out and say OMG I'm so sorry, but we are completely out of that. I'd love to say this is just a cynical person, but I have worked in places like retail before. And yes, I've done this myself a few times. Honestly though, it's more because I freaking know there's nothing in the back within reasonably findable range. So I'll do it to make you feel better. Plus I get a break off the floor for a few minutes. Exactly. It's easier to pretend to look in the back out of courtesy than it is to just go I'm sure there are none back there, ma'am. Trust me. Turn it off and on again isn't some kind of comedy gag at your expense. It really does solve 90% plus of all known home user problems. The other 10% are solved by making sure it's definitely plugged in. And the other 10% is spent googling how the hell you managed to go over 100. Soldier here. Everyone knows that the government wastes money, but you have no idea how much the army will spend on a vehicle that will quite possibly never get used. If you ever drive on a base and see the lineup of heavy armored vehicles that look brand new, it's because they probably haven't moved since they got them. This, plus the military, has no concept of investment, meaning that it will gladly make the decision to save $1 million now, but pay $10 million down the line for maintenance/upgrade/training whatever, rather than pay $5 million now and actually save money over time. This bad practice is compounded by the fact that they will often refuse to scrap the poor investment until well after it's run over budget. Sunk cost is a concept that is completely lost on the military. Case in point, the CV-22 Osprey. It's marketed as a stealth infil/exfil and cargo platform. Anyone who uses it will tell you that it can't do any of those things. You can feel the beat of its rotors in your chest from like 3 miles away. 12 brothers can hardly fit in there with all their gear, and it's expensive as hit to maintain. But we are still pushing it because it looks cool, I guess. Sometimes the government is dumb. That there's a startling number lawyers who are absolutely, totally incompetent. I mean drug and alcohol addicted and or barely literate incompetent. Courts don't call them to account and often tacitly cover up for them. Lawyers have to screw up spectacularly and repeatedly to get disbarred. This is true. Also contributing to this problem, there are too many damn law schools in America. Legal industry was hit hard after 2008 and the perpetual onslaught of truly incompetent idiots who get handed a JD as well as $150k plus in debt for that piece of crap is egregious. Yeah. I come from a family full of lawyers and had always been interested in it myself growing up. I've worked at law firms and have a good enough understanding of what lawyers do that I think I'd be good at it. Like, I used to read Westlaw books for fun. Every lawyer in my family told me under no circumstances should I go to law school or try to become a lawyer cause the market was completely saturated and the debt I would accrue would not be worth it for the hitty living I would probably make for years, if I even managed to find a job out of law school at all. Corporate accountant. The amount of control I have over how much money the company makes or loses on paper is huge. A bad accountant says 2 plus 2 is 5. A good accountant says 2 plus 2 equals 4, and a great accountant asks what you want 2 plus 2 to equal. Ducking this. I can do amazing things with expense categorizations, overhead allocation, and depreciation methods. Most people don't realize that financial documents only convey a message, and that message may be different depending on who is reading it. I had someone tell me that ideally you want to show the government you are losing money, show liquidity/coverage to your lenders, and show growth to your shareholders. All of those things can be altered depending on COGS and overhead allocation. Ducking love finance /r/bullhit in the majority of cases. Auditors will pick up on this kind of thing for any corporation big enough to have public shareholders. I was an aviation electrician for 10 years. All it takes to cause a catastrophic failure in an aircraft is a piece of debris smaller than a penny. There's a reason that people from the aviation industry tend to be absolutely malretentive when it comes to tools and machine cleanliness. I've heard that all tools are returned in individual cutout foam storage cases, like handgun cases, to ensure a socket doesn't end up in an engine. This is exactly how it is. All toolboxes are shadowed, and everything is inventoried and checked, not just at the beginning of the day, but every time a panel on an aircraft is opened and closed. Amusingly, my toolbox at home is like this. Although my personal tools could probably fit in a small show box, my toolbox is the size of a small end table to accommodate the system I grew up with. Not that this is secret, but people don't know. I'm a social worker on Long Island, New York, one of the most expensive places to live in the USA. Guess what we generously, compared to a number of states, give to welfare recipients? Food stamps, a maximum of $180/person/month. Public assistance, $150 a month. Rental assistance, unchanged since 1976, $450/month/family. A single room apartment around here goes for at least $1,200. BTW. That's it. That's all. I can't stand people complaining about people getting rich off welfare. Honestly. Anyone who puts tons of effort into defrauding the system isn't gonna get much. Just moved off the island to Indiana. Cost of living is so low it's like I doubled my salary. Yay. But now you have to live in Indiana. I've lived in Indiana for over 25 years. Send help. You'll never get told a nurse is monitoring your breathing. I could be pretending to take your pulse again or something else distracting. But if you know I'm monitoring your breathing, you'll breathe differently. I'm breathing differently after reading this. Cartoonist here. It doesn't matter that we make kids shows. We are crude, vulgar jackasses. I'm well aware. I survived the 90s. Unemployment keeps your brain locked on the suicide channel almost constantly. Being unemployed is not a happy, enviable vacation of lounging around and enjoying your freedom. It is more like gears turning and grinding closer to your ears. Closer to ducking, crushing you with worry, resentment, and self-loathing. Every single day. Think about this the next time you have a hitty day at work. Edit. Obligatory gold thanks. I'm happy that my honest description of my continued feelings towards unemployment resonated with people. You're reading my ducking mind, dude. Someone who just became unemployed last week and is worried about finding his next job. Librarian here. 99% of the time your late fines can be waived. But only 1 if our boss isn't around, and 2 you're nice to us and don't abuse the privilege. Good on you. I actually don't mind paying fines. The fines are dirt cheap, and I did keep the item or items longer and knew the consequences. Also, I can afford it. I know I've already paid in taxes. But if some percentage of fines are forgiven, I'd rather it be for someone who really needs it. Like a kid who can't always control when they get back to return library materials. Agreed. And at mine it's like $0.25 per day per item. Which can add up if you borrow many items. But I need a couple extra days to read a book. I'm okay with $0.50. I'm a nurse. We give morphine to dying patients more or less as assisted suicide. Having watched both my parents die, may I be the first to say, bless you and thank you for your service. I hope someone does this for me at the end. By the time most of us get old, we are gonna have pot, video games, and most significantly, virtual reality easily available in old age homes. We all will get to die however we want. Gaff tape fixes everything. Electrical tape and duct tape just have more exposure. It's great stuff, but also exponentially more expensive. Is it though? One strip of gaff tape will do the job of 5 strips of duct tape. That hit adds up. Thrift store worker here. No, we don't wash everything before we put it out. People think we have massive industrial washers in the bag. Nope. Judging by the smell of thrift stores, I never thought anything was washed. Structural engineering. The East Coast is probably way more screwed in the long run as far as earthquakes go than the West Coast. The reason is that until the advent of national seismic codes in the last century, designing for earthquakes pretty much stops when the people building stuff no longer remember that there's earthquakes in their region. We know from history that many parts of the East Coast experienced some major earthquakes on several 100-year cycles, maybe longer. A seismic risk map of the East Coast actually requires modern structures to have some degree of earthquake load resistance against a moderate quake, and it is not uncommon anymore for bridges and buildings in places like New York City or Boston to have seismic loads govern, meaning that's the highest load a piece is designed for. The design. I've worked on multiple Boston area projects where seismic retrofits were being applied to existing bridges, some major ones. It's all very routine and gets little attention. So what's the problem? Look at a picture of New York City, Philly, Boston. 80% of those buildings are unreinforced masonry. All those mid-level buildings and refurbished industrial and commercial spaces built before 1950 or so were built by people with generally no regard for earthquakes. If reinforcement or steel framing was used, it was not designed with seismic loads in mind. Know what kind of structure gets flattened in even small earthquakes? Mid-height, unreinforced, masonry structures. This means that when New York City or Boston eventually gets a moderate earthquake again, vast sections of these cities are going to be completely flattened. The major infrastructure in newer buildings will be largely fine. But 70-80% of these cities are buildings that are 100 plus years old. We are talking millions and millions of people homeless with an enormous death toll. Sure, some buildings are brought up to code, but most are not because they are grandfathered with all but the most major of structural renovations. Bridges, depends. Old bridges that still sit on masonry piers from the 1800s are in big trouble, but we do retrofit them with just about every rehab job and most get rebuilt on 50-75-year cycles. And no, the damage can't be compared to San Francisco, because as bad as some recent quakes were, the frequency has meant almost all buildings were built with an earthquake in mind. Not so in Hartford, Court or Springfield. MA.TL. Doctor, parts of the East Coast are likely going to be ruined in an inevitable moderate future earthquake, and there's nothing we can really do about it. That earthquake we had in the Vaslach-DC area a few years ago actually caused some damage, like to the monument. It was a pretty violent one. Hit and my house broke. And everyone on the West Coast just laughed at us. I actually worry about when we are going to get another one. Those guys that do the speed paintings in front of large audiences have the entire thing drawn out. They always paint on a dark canvas and then lightly sketch out the main areas. If you get close you can see the faint marks. All the way out in the audience it just looks like a black canvas. It's still a pretty neat trick to do it that fast. And they have probably done it a gazillion times, so it's just muscle memory for them. Teacher here. It always surprises people that 90% of my job has nothing to do with kids and more to do with paperwork and dealing with other bureaucratic crap. Seriously considering leaving the profession because after several years of teaching, I can say that part of the job gets worse each year. When I graduated from college, I had 6 friends who were all going into education. They were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, wanted to truly make a difference. 2 were going to inner city schools, in kids lives. In less than 18 months all but 1 had quit. The last friend stayed on for another year then quit as well. All said the same thing, the parents and the bureaucratic bull had killed it for them. And man, the ducking stories they'd tell were curly autos. I thought sales was a meat grinder. But sales is a Girl Scout picnic compared to what teachers have to go through on a day-to-day basis. What kind of stories? Exactly? I know quite a few bright-eyed, bushy-tailed would-be teachers myself. There's too much work, and not enough people to do it. Our pay attracts a lot of apathetic people, making it difficult to get good work out of them. Quality workers see the workload and move on after a year. Funny thing is, if we had more quality workers, it would be an easy ducking job with decent salary for the responsibility. State Gov agency. Yeah. We are going to need you to cut about $250k out of your budget per year. True. Your workload won't go down. It will increase with all the people we are laying off. But we still expect it to be done as normal and without errors. The last few years in State Gov have been brutal. More work. Less to do it. No more pay. Start the beast in action. When you call me for help with your software, I'm probably just going to Google the answer. And you think I'm a genius. Yeah. But the difference is we have the knowledge to decipher what's being said. This may or may not be obvious, but if my grandmother says the one thing doesn't work, me figuring out what that means, what it's called, to even look it up, and then following the steps to fix it is far more than she could have hoped to do herself. The same applies to a lot of people, right? Just because the manual is available online doesn't mean that everyone can read it. Ducking like and subscribe.